Senator Mitch McConnell on leaving his leadership post in the Senate. Let's watch.
Introspection that accompanies the grieving process. Perhaps it is God's way of reminding you of your own life's journey, to reprioritize the impact of the world that we will all inevitably leave behind. I turned 82 last week. The end of my contributions are closer than I'd prefer. My career in the United States Senate began amidst the Reagan Revolution. The truth is, when I got here, I was just happy if anybody remembered my name. I think back to my first days in the Senate with deep appreciation for the time that helped shape my view of the world. I'm unconflicted about the good within our country and the irreplaceable role we play as the leader of the free world. It's why I worked so hard to get the national security package passed earlier this month. Believe me, I know the politics within my party at this particular moment in time. I have many faults. Misunderstanding politics is not one of them. That said, I believe more strongly than ever that America's global leadership is essential to preserving the shining city on a hill that Ronald Reagan discussed.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about Mitch McConnell, who has announced that he is stepping down as the top Senate Republican, okay? He is stepping down as the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, and a lot of the conservative base is celebrating Mitch McConnell finally calling it quits when it comes to leadership. Now, he didn't announce that he was going to retire, which I think that he should. I mean, he belongs in the same nursing home as Joe Biden because he's clearly and obviously on his last legs. And when this story first came out, there's a reason why I'm a little bit late to this story. It's because, honestly, I didn't know how to react to it, right? I didn't know whether or not I should give a eulogy or to talk about what this actually means in the present, okay? Because I got to tell you guys, I actually think that Mitch McConnell, he's one of the most fascinating politicians that I have ever witnessed, okay? Because back in his heyday, he was truly a genius. He was the top Republican in the Senate under the Obama administration, and he single-handedly stopped the Obama administration from destroying the country more than Obama did at the time. And you got to give him credit when it comes to some things, like, for example, the current makeup of the federal courts, in which Mitch McConnell single-handedly blocked Obama from appointing a lot of liberal justices to empty seats in the court, which allowed Trump to come in and to fill those seats with conservative justices. And we are reaping the benefits of that today. And I think that Mitch McConnell doesn't get enough credit for his role in that. But at the same time, Mitch McConnell is probably one of the most corrupt politicians that I've ever seen in my life. And I also think that he's responsible for the current GOP philosophy when it comes to legislating, which is doing nothing and occasionally agreeing with Democrats, which I think is part of the reason why the Republican Party struggles to win. Is because the Republican Party is not used to actually really leading with their legislation, right? So I think that Mitch McConnell is a mixed bag, okay? And, you know, towards the end of his career, he has become overtly anti-Trump, okay? He's done things that I think are, again, extremely corrupt. Like, for example, apparently he is the one that stopped Trump from pardoning Julian Assange as Trump was leaving office in 2021.
We're hearing tonight that neither man, particularly Julian Assange, we don't know if this is true, is likely to get a pardon. Why? Well, apparently because Republicans in the Senate, and by Republicans in the Senate we mean Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the leader of Republicans in the Senate, has sent word over to the White House, if you pardon Julian Assange, we are much more likely to convict you in an impeachment trial. Now, is it legal to hold that over a president's head? We're not lawyers. We don't know. It's certainly wrong. But more than that, it tells you everything about their priorities. at a time when this country in some ways is coming apart. We're at a pivot point in American history. And if you're watching this show, you probably feel pretty threatened, and for good reason. There are people on the other channels saying they're going to hunt you down like a terrorist. At that moment, what is Mitch McConnell, your designated defender in the United States Senate, worrying about? He's worrying about protecting the uniparty in Washington, not his party and the Democratic Party in permanent Washington.
Yeah, so Tucker Carlson was spot on about Mitch McConnell's priorities, and I think that Mitch stepping down from leadership has everything to do with the uniparty, okay? Because if you listen to Mitch McConnell in his speech, he's telling you why he's stepping down. Well, he's stepping down because the party is no longer the party of the neocon Republicans, okay? It's not the party of Judge Bush. It's not even the party of Reagan. It's the party of Trump, and the party of Trump has become populist, okay? And that populism within the conservative political spectrum has basically overtaken the old guard. And because of that, you see the old guard slowly but surely leaving, okay? And this comes amid the biggest fight that we've had in a long time between the populist and the old guard, which is the funding of Ukraine, okay? Should we continue to fund Ukraine as a part of our neocon foreign policy approach to foreign wars, okay, in which we are in this forever proxy war with Russia because Putin bad and we must oppose Russia no matter what? And that's essentially, again, the reason why we are funding this war in Ukraine, as you have some people, like, for example, Rand Paul, who is a part of a group of Senate Republicans who are revolting against Mitch McConnell and the old guard Republicans when it comes to funding this war.
You know something about criminal neglect. So, Senator Paul, what's your response and what's your plan, sir?
You know, I would say it's criminal neglect for Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden to get together to send $100 billion overseas to fix someone else's border before addressing our border. We have an emergency. We have an invasion. We have 700,000 people came across in the last 2 months, and they're willing just to punt on that. You know, they put forward a fake proposal. It wasn't any good. We shot it down, but that doesn't mean we're ready to give up on it. Many of us want to fight. 32 of us out of 48, 3/4 of us said we wanted to keep fighting. We want to actually fix the border before we ship $100 billion of our money overseas. I meet no one in Kentucky, no conservatives across the land that are for this. But the leadership of the Senate under Mitch McConnell is more concerned with sending your money to Ukraine than they are with the invasion of the southern border. And I've had enough. I'm going to do everything in my power to slow down and stop this. And I told them they can vote when hell freezes over because, frankly, this isn't in the best interest of our country. The money has to be borrowed. We don't have $100 billion sitting around. We borrow $1.5 trillion, and they're going to borrow another $100 billion. So essentially, we ask China for money to send it to Ukraine. It makes us weaker. It's bad for our country. Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden, and Chuck Schumer are wrong on this, and I'm going to do everything I can to slow them down at the very least. And possibly there'll be enough of an uprising of people calling in and saying, Mitch McConnell, who are you? Do you represent the Republicans? Do you represent conservatives? Are you in lockstep with Chuck Schumer?
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that. Okay, Senator Rand Paul standing up for the America First agenda, which is to essentially take care of America's borders first before worrying about somebody else's borders, right? But then you have other Republican politicians that don't necessarily agree with that. They want to put everybody else's border first. Like, for example, Mitt Romney, who happens to not be running for re-election in 2024, he's coming out and declaring that, hey, I'm not going to vote for Trump over Biden. And one of the reasons why is because of foreign policy and the fact that I feel like Ukraine's borders are much more important than America's borders. Take a look.
I think that those comments there may raise some questions for people watching at home. Would you vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden?
No, absolutely not. I mean, for me, there are two factors in deciding who I want to have as the leader of my country and the person who is the example of the president for my kids and my grandkids. One is their position and policies. And on foreign policy, I'm not aligned with Donald Trump, at least as I understand his policy. On domestic policy, yeah, I align with many of his domestic policies. But there's another dimension besides policy, and that's character. And I think what America is as a nation what has allowed us to be the most powerful nation on earth and the leader of the earth is the character of the people who have been our leaders, past presidents, but also mothers, fathers, church leaders, university presidents, and so forth. Having a president who is so defaulted of character would have an enormous impact on the character of America. And for me, that's the primary consideration.
Senator Mitt Romney.
If we don't pass aid for Ukraine, then I think Ukraine has a very difficult time preserving their geographic integrity and life. You're going to have a lot of people who lose their life as Russia runs across Ukraine. And that will make it very clear to people around the world that you really can't trust America's word, because we made a commitment in 1994 to respect the sovereignty of Ukraine, to help defend the people of Ukraine if they were attacked. And that's what's happening. And if we walk away from that, they won't trust our word. Europe will say, hey, the United States is not with us. We're not going to be with them if there's something they want to do in the Pacific. For instance, let them deal with China. Let America deal with China and the issues there. So we're strong globally, in part because of our friends. We have alliances. We always talk about how the Russians and the Chinese don't have the kinds of friends we have. Well, we have friends in part because we stand together. And if we don't stand with our friends, we will lose strength, and that will ultimately come to hurt us.
So you disagree with your colleague, Senator J.D. Vance, who is making the argument that $60 billion more dollars won't fundamentally change Ukraine's stance on the battlefield.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. It just happens to be as accurate as it is irrelevant. All right, it may not change their stance on the battlefield. What it does do is communicate to the entire world that we honor our commitments, and we stand with our friends, and we will help freedom fighters around the world who are our friends and allies. And that's a message which is important to the people in Taiwan, to the people in Japan, to the people in India, to the people in Europe. I mean, all these people are watching to see, can you count on America? Or is America so isolationist, it doesn't care what happens to the rest of us? If that's the case, by the way, if we cede leadership, if we're no longer the leader of the free world, if we're no longer the arsenal of democracy, then the world is going to look for different leaders. And I know at least one player that's happy to step into that role, and that's China. And a world where Xi Jinping is the leader of the world is a very dangerous world, and not good for America, not good for our businesses, for our economy, but certainly not good for our freedom.
Yeah, so you see now, you heard that, okay? Mitt Romney declaring that, hey, I would rather vote for Biden than Trump, okay? And he claims that it's because of Trump's character, when it really has nothing to do with Trump's character, as much as it has to do with foreign policy, okay? Because Trump has basically refused to commit to sending more money to Ukraine. And the establishment is seeing the writing on the wall in regards to the direction of the Republican Party and how Republican voters are not budging when it comes to our demands that, hey, we're not going to take care of another country before we take care of us, okay? We need to secure the border. We demand that the border be secure before we even think about giving money to Ukraine. And even then, we still shouldn't do it, right? We still shouldn't do it. And make no mistake, that is what this is actually really about, okay? Because Mike Johnson, the leader of the House, who knows how long he'll actually be leader of the House or Speaker of the House, because, you know, he's currently in a situation where he's basically blocking the bill from the Senate from being voted on in the House to send more money to Ukraine and Israel as well, too, unless we get some type of provision to secure the border. And best believe the establishment, they're not going to just allow Mike Johnson to continue to stall sending money to Ukraine, because a lot of these politicians are dependent on keeping the military-industrial complex funded, which is what this is all about, in order to keep the checks flowing in, the campaign donations flowing in for themselves, okay? And Mr. Mike Benz, who was a former official at the Trump State Department, he actually posted a video on social media with a hypothesis about what's actually really going on here in regards to the rift between establishment Republicans and more populist conservatives when it comes to the funding of Ukraine, and how maybe, just maybe, with Mitch McConnell stepping down and with all the neocons and the old guard leaving the Republican Party, this could be paving the way for the establishment to basically try to ban the Republican Party from our politics.
Hey, I got to record this while it's fresh. I have a bad feeling about this McConnell stepping down situation. I know everyone's celebrating right now because, you know, Mitch McConnell has been such a magnetic force for nefarious blob activity for such a long time, it's hard to even count the years. I understand he's the longest serving, basically, party leader in the Senate, I think in Senate history. And, Senator Mike Lee refers to the firm of Schumer and McConnell and all that. So why do I have an uneasy feeling about it? I think it comes down to this. We've seen time and time again over the past several years, Western democracies basically outlaw political parties. Ukraine outlawed political parties. Germany is openly contemplating banning the AfD party, which is running on a plank of effectively neutrality with Russia and restoration of economic relations there. You see this happening with the Vox party in Spain, all over NATO. Basically, countries that are disobedient to the blob are actually just getting purged or effectively made a criminal, RICO type enterprise to even be engaged in domestic politics around that. And I think what's happening right now with the Ukraine bill is very existential in the Republican Party. It's really the first time that Republicans as a party have ever fought back against the blob. I mean, Republicans owned the blob for much of the 20th century and the 21st century. I mean, George Bush, blob monster. Mitt Romney, blob monster. John McCain, blob monster. There's never been a situation where a populist Republican has both risen to power and successfully resisted the blob. If Ukraine funding gets killed in the House, which is my personal political preference. I mean, make no mistake about that. There's almost no bigger champion for that than me. Watching Mitch McConnell suddenly out of nowhere declare today, also on the day that the Supreme Court granted cert to the presidential immunity case, and seeing how they're talking, the blob is openly talking about kind of criminalizing the Republican Party if they continue to go astray towards populism. Now, look, let me make this perfectly clear. This is a totally low confidence interval thing. I'm not making a call here. I can't see through the fog of war of this. I just want to make that perfectly clear. But I just kind of want to get my weird sense on record that I have a weird feeling that McConnell may be apprised of what they might do to the Republican Party and to Republicans in House leadership if the Ukraine bill if the Ukraine aid bill dies on the vine. They're, just like they Russiagated Trump and locked up almost all this, top people at some point, during the Russiagate probe. I mean, what they did to Mike Flynn, what they did to Rudy Giuliani, what they did to George Papadopoulos, and everyone. I could see them doing that to Mike Johnson. I could see them doing that to party leadership. If you guys think, Russiagate is over, I mean, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, Russiagate 3.0 now is going to be the biggest of them all, because not only, when Russiagate 1.0 happened, there wasn't even a war going on, and let alone a war that we're losing, actively losing. So this is totally existential to the blob's empire management strategy in order to continue to feed the teat of the corporate and financial interests who need a constantly expanding American empire pie to pad their margins with. And they're effectively, that donor drafter class is who determines most of Congress, frankly, and certainly the personnel of the executive branch. And I am concerned seeing this Mitch McConnell news. I'm not saying this just to be contrarian, because I know everyone's sort of spiking footballs. And again, no mistake, I completely support 100%, the populist agenda in defunding this nonsense. I just can't help this weird feeling like Mitch McConnell knows or was informed of what might befall Republicans if they actually, block this bill, or if Trump is able to, basically make it to election day because the Supreme Court blocks a conviction. And, I would not rule out them literally burning the entire Republican Party, the blob, literally burning the entire Republican Party to the ground. And then in its ashes, once everyone's been prosecuted, once it's been completely and fully purged, then they could install a sort of Nikki Haley figure to get it back on the horse of the 20th century cowboy mafia. I could literally see that happening, and so I share the sentiment, but I see weird things in the tea leaves, but I don't see them clearly. So again, this could be nothing. It's just a feeling.
Honestly, I don't think that's an unreasonable theory. I really don't. Like, I actually think it makes sense. I mean, you are seeing the blob monsters, so to speak, aka the establishment Republicans. They're stepping away from the party, right? And they're all kind of retiring at the same time. They're all leaving at the same time. And what that paves the way for is for basically the liberal media, the establishment powers that be, to put a target on the back of the Republicans that are left, because the only Republicans that are going to be left that will be allowed in the party, really, because, the voters are basically, not voting neocons in, are populist Republicans. And that could pave the way for the establishment to essentially start to either, outright kind of ban the party, so to speak, or maybe even start locking up and arresting the Republicans that are in power, that stand up against the agenda. You're definitely going to see the party become isolated, so to speak, right? Where you are going to have the establishment Republicans just leave, right? And the only individuals that will be left will be, the populist individuals that were elected by the people. And again, that does kind of create a target, right? Where it is clear, okay, well, it's, the establishment, Democrats, ex-Republicans versus the Republicans that are left, which, for the most part will probably be the more populist-leaning ones. And I think that you could see that type of scenario. And I believe that this is one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of these Republicans abandon ship, because, I mean, let's be honest, having conflicts within the party or divisions within the party they're not abnormal, okay? Like, for example, you see the Democrats and progressives. They have conflicts all the time. But the difference is that progressives, they don't vote enough to actually really make a difference when it comes to the agenda, right? The Democrats are always going to go along with the establishment agenda no matter what, because, again, they're populists, they're progressives in their party. Again, it's AOC, right? Like, AOC's weak. She's a social media star. She's not a real legislator or a threat, okay? I mean, they voted her into Congress, okay? And she was there to fight the establishment, right? To fight Nancy Pelosi and the establishment Democrats. And then, a few years later, she was calling Nancy Pelosi Mama Bear, right? Hugging up with Nancy Pelosi and all types of stuff, okay? She got a lot of backlash from the progressive base for doing that, okay? The Jimmy Dore types, okay, that are kind of, they're more progressive on economic policies, but they're anti-establishment, they're anti-corruption, right? They're against sending more money to Ukraine and the military-industrial complex and stuff like that. But that's not what the current progressives are, right, in Congress, because essentially they're now on board with the establishment, right? So they don't have that in the Democrat Party. And that's why you don't see this division within the Democrat Party, even though clearly there are ideological differences, but ultimately today they're going to get on board. But with the Republican Party, it's different, right? It's much deeper than that, because you're actually seeing the Republicans, the non-establishment Republicans, the populist Republicans, conservatives actually standing up against the agenda. They're actually saying, no, right? We don't want to continue to fund this war in Ukraine. We don't want to keep sending money overseas. We actually are sticking to our guns on this, right? We're not going to go along with the neocon globalist agenda anymore, right? And because of that, that division is basically tearing the party apart. You have a mass exodus of establishment Republicans from the party, because essentially it's not tenable for them to be in the party anymore, right? And now, it creates some isolation where you could see some crazy things begin to happen in regard to alienation of what's left of the Republican Party once everything is kind of said and done. And that could be what is happening when you see somebody like Mitch McConnell saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to step down amidst this fight about the funding for Ukraine, which is a real debate in Congress. And if that agenda continues to get blocked, Mike Johnson's leadership is probably going to be under threat, right? I mean, you're going to see a real push to have him ousted, right? And, again, it's kind of scary to think about. But I think Mike Benz definitely brings up some points that are worth considering in regards to seeing Mitch McConnell and a lot of these establishment Republicans, these neocons, basically abandon the party and basically stand with Democrats over their own party, even though they supposedly agree with Trump on most of the domestic agenda, but when it comes to this foreign policy, though, okay, oh, well, that's where they draw the line, right? It's too far, right? We have to leave the party and stand with Democrats. Again, it's fascinating, right? It really is. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.